Hey y'all, I finally got around to doing the cage shop on the Pioneer 1000. Pretty happy with how it came out. I'm going to show you a little walk around, how I plan on doing it, then I'll show you the finished product. And then for those of you guys that are interested, I'll go through and show you some steps along the way and some tips and tricks. Pretty easy cage to chop from what I've seen, and definitely looks nice, and it'll help me fit it in garages and not get hung up on trees and stuff so much. So I think it's a worthwhile mod. The whole thing total maybe took me three and a half hours. Alright, so ever since I put these tires on the Pioneer, it doesn't fit in the garage. So I've been parking it on like the side of my little carport. But I want to put it back in the garage because it's starting to get a little corrosion on stuff. Just sitting out with a little bit of, spray on it. See the bolts and stuff. So this took my little grinder right here, a little DeWalt grinder, and I chopped out a 3 1/4 inch section of the cage. You can see I went down into this little bracket right here a little bit. You can see how it looks on that side, and that's what you got to do to get the full 3 1/4 inches. And I'm gonna find something I can put in there to sleeve it, and then in the front I'm gonna take out some down here underneath the grab bar handle. That's the easiest way to do it. And yeah, I'll give you guys some tips and tricks on the way. Obviously I'm not a very good welder. All I've got is that old arc welder over there. All right, so there's the finished product. From the outside, it doesn't look too different. I think that actually looks better. It looks about proportional. The factory roll cage just sticks up so high. But this thing is a very upright seating position. So from the inside, it's very noticeable, that 3 inch delta. But it definitely looks mean from out here. I know people chop these cages like 4 and 6 inches. I don't know how they do that, because I'm about 5'10", and let me show you how it looks when you're sitting in it. So let me zoom out. So this is my eye height, which means that my GoPro is going to be recording all this roof now. So, there's a pretty good amount of room before my head hits, but you're hitting bumps off road. Luckily, my roof's nice and soft. This bar back here, I can just barely hit it with the headrest the way it is. So I think that's going to be okay. But this front bar, if you weren't wearing a seatbelt, you're a lot more likely to bang your head on this guy now. So passengers beware, especially sitting in the middle seat that's a little higher. This cage bolts on here, and there's a junction up here, which means when you loosen up all 6 of these bolts on each side, you have some wiggle room to make it realign. Most people do some crazy shit where they cut some out down here and they cut some out up here, and they have to modify this bracket behind the seat, and the bed almost hits it. I want to keep it as simple as possible. I only need to go 3 inches to fit in the garage, so I'm not doing all that. Also, I didn't want to go any more than 3 inches, because then you get in situations where if you have a tall passenger, they're banging their head on the poles, and that's no fun. I got both the back sections cut out. You can see how it kind of just fell down once I did that, because there's some slack in all these different joints. Then I found a piece of pipe in my garage that it's a little too small. There's some clearance around it, but don't worry, I can fill that gap with the welder, because I'm going to over penetrate anyways with the stick. This is really just there so when I over penetrate, I don't blow a hole. It'll actually start filling in that gap. Then I added a self-tapping screw to hold it so it doesn't fall down the pipe, because that would have been really annoying. And now this thing's about this long. Now all I got to do is undo the front, stand in the middle, and set this on here. Once I get that on there, I'll put a self-tapping screw through the top of it as well to kind of hold it, and I'll start playing with how much I want to chop out of the front. Yes, I'm not powder coating this purple. No, it's not going to be as strong, and thank you for all your opinions, but this is a farm buggy that I was kind of want to fit in the garage. I don't really give a shit what it looks like, and I think people who chop their cages and paint them cute colors are awesome and very cool. It's just not really my style. So the quick and dirty way, as usual around here. All right, so here's how it looks with it sitting down on the sleeves. There's a little gap there, whatever. I didn't really measure anything, and that's gonna get a little better once the front comes down some. I didn't really take a lot of time to get my angles perfect, so I'm not surprised there's a little bit of gap. So I may have to do a little bit of grinding to get that to fit a little more flush once I get the front to come down. Right now it's hitting over there, so I can't really do much. But so next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these bars off, these front bars right beneath the handle right here. Boop, cut that. And then I'll be able to adjust where I want it to go. The thing I gotta figure out is how I'm gonna support it once I cut those bars off. A lot of people like put some straps and hang it from the garage door or something, I think, which is what I may end up doing, because I think I can fit in the garage now with it cut like that. I don't know, we'll see. Alrighty, so I got it lined up pretty good. A few tips and tricks. You can see how this is lined up right here. 3 1/4 inches cut out. Looks pretty good. If you loosen up these bolts, and remove these bolts, you have a lot of play, because this actually ties it back around there, right? So you gotta take those little bolts out. So what I'm gonna do when I get it all done is I'm just gonna have to drill this little bracket out bigger to put that bolt back in. But as you can see, what I did was I tilted it forward ever so slightly right there. You can barely tell, but there is a little bit of and then there's this right up here, which looks pretty decent. This has a little bit of to it, and yeah, that gives you this lining up perfectly. Obviously, it's not exactly a parallelogram. This has more angle than this one. So when you drop the back and the front, you end up with the pipe wanting to sit back here. So by tilting this pipe forward like this, by loosening these two up, you can get it all to line up pretty good. So I got this one lined up. I'm gonna put a couple spot welds on this. Then I'm gonna go and line that one up. You can see it's still a little wonky. I haven't played with it too much. There's a lot of adjustment in this roll cage basically, so this is actually pretty easy compared to some other ones. These are the ones you're gonna see the most. I'm gonna try to make them look the best. So I'm gonna tack weld this one, get it aligned, go around to that side, tack weld that one, and then we'll start working on the top. So far, I've been working on this for about an hour, so pretty quick job. All right, so it's all tacked in place now. Yes, I know that looks like shit. The problem is this pipe up here is really thin. The back pipe's a little thicker, and the only rods I have that are really small enough for that are about 20 years old, and they look like crap. So I'm having to use some bigger rods, so I'm having a hard time with this thin stuff on this one. Might call it a night and go get some smaller rods tomorrow morning. But up here I'm able to weld to this stuff okay. So I know I didn't grind the paint yet. I know that's stupid, whatever, but I wanted to get everything lined up intact. Now I'm gonna grind all the paint and grind most of those welds off and go all the way around them. But it looks pretty good considering, you know, it's a quick and dirty job. The alignment's really okay. And again, that's just because this cage has so many different little mounts you can play with to get some wiggle room. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna tighten all the bolts down, see if any of the welds bust loose. They shouldn't. And then I'm gonna grind everything smooth, get all the powder coat off, and see what I can get done with these junk welding rods. One thing I'm totally doing wrong is you should have at least a wire welder to do this, but we'll make it work. So, all right, so I apologize, I missed some footage in here. I got everything welded last night, and I was trying to grind stuff. I didn't want to be grinding on the buggy. Didn't want to tear up my plastics any more than I already do. So I decided to unbolt the whole cage, throw it over in the grass where I could grind on it and paint and not make a mess. A few things to point out. The cage comes off really easy. You just got the seatbelt bolts, 3 of those, 2 little bolts and nuts back here on this bracket, and that's it. Everything else we'd already had off before. So it's pretty easy to pull the whole cage off because it's in 2 pieces. You don't really even need 2 people. It came out okay. Definitely not beautiful. Had to do a lot of grinding because I did not have the right welding rods. So it was kind of like a weld repeat, and I didn't grind it super smooth because I didn't want to make it any thinner than it already is. So what I realized is this front section right here, it's upside down right now, is super thin. It's almost there just for looks. The strength of this roll cage comes from this back piece. So the Pioneer 1000 basically has a roll bar behind you, and the front of this is just to kind of help keep this roll bar straight, I guess. But this metal's about twice as thick, and it's got a reinforcement in the center and a bunch of brackets at the top to reinforce it. This over here is super thin. It's scary how light that piece of metal is. This back piece is a lot stronger. I was able to use a bigger stick and penetrate, tying this bracket into the pipe, because that's exactly where I cut it, which worked out nice. And I have pretty good confidence in this piece. It's pretty strong. It's not beautiful again. I didn't spend a ton of time grinding it, but neither does Honda. Look at the Honda welds. So I'm gonna throw it back on there and it's pretty much done. The next thing I'm doing today is I'm taking off that piece of shit front bracket lift that is bending, pathetic, and then it's gonna rub really bad. So I'm gonna have to order the Texas Tough Customs front arms. The reason I'm going Texas Tough Customs instead of CFAB is I don't want any extra lift. Number one, I don't want to go through axles and be flipping over. This thing already has more ground clearance than I need to go through everywhere I go. It's a pretty narrow build, so I don't need to go any higher. And number two, the whole point of this mod was just fit in the garage. So if I do a 3-inch lift on it, on top of where it sits now, it's not going to fit in the garage. This lift says it's a 3-inch lift. It might have been a 2-inch lift, and now that it's bent, it's about a 1-inch lift. So that junk's going to come off. This is definitely the easiest way to do it because I only cut out 4 sections of pipe. If you do it a lot of the other ways, you end up cutting out, you know, at least 6, maybe more sections of pipe. The downside of the way I did it is you can really only go 3 inches. I did 3 1/4. You could probably get 3 1/2 inches out of it if you wanted to cut a little bit more into this bracket down here. The problem is this bend, right? You can't cut any farther into the bend, so you have to cut more into this side. So if you want to do a small chop, this is 100% the way to do it easily. If you want to go bigger than that, well, you got to spend a little more time and do some more cuts. If you're going to do a bigger chop, you basically end up having to take metal out of where I took metal out, right here, and take metal out down here. Ta-da!